Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Academy on Air. My name is Tom Gillespie, and I'm a member of the UKI's product expert group when it comes to automation. And today we'll be covering the new responsive search ads. So in terms of an agenda, I'll be giving you a brief introduction of responsive search ads and how they can be helping your businesses grow, as well as looking into how we go about implementation, some of the best practices that we should be following, and then secondly, going through more of the frequently asked questions and a few visual examples on what a good and a bad responsive search ad looks like, as well as finishing off with some Q&A. So, introduction to responsive search ads. Right now, there are over 3.5 billion searches happening each day on Google. So what does this mean for advertisers? How can they serve highly relevant ads to each search query with as little effort as possible? Now, responsive search ads simplify the creation and management of these search ads. So responsive search ads let you create an ad that adapts to show more text and more relevant messages to your customers. By entering multiple headlines and descriptions, or in this instance, text assets, Google Ads will automatically test different combinations and learn which combination performs best over time, giving you the best chance of winning the search auction. So in terms of key benefits, there's 4 main areas. Firstly is simplicity. You can be saving time by creating one ad with multiple headlines and description options, so Google Ads can show the most relevant message to your customers. Secondly is flexibility. It creates flexible ads to adapt to the device's width that could show up to 3 headlines and 2 descriptions, giving you more room to share your message to potential customers. Thirdly is the benefit of control. You still provide all the headline and descriptions content. For advertisers who need more control, you can restrict a position to show specific headlines and or the descriptions with a pinning function, which we're going to get into a bit later. Finally is the final benefit, looking at it from a performance point of view. Responsive search ads reach more potential customers by increasing your opportunity to compete in more auctions and match to more queries. Ad groups with responsive search ads tend to have a click uplift of 5 to 15%. So when we're asking ourselves in terms of providing multiple headlines, RSA gives advertisers the opportunity to provide multiple headlines and descriptions to create one ad that adapts to show the right message to your customers at the right time. By adopting responsive search ads, advertisers are eligible for a larger new ad format that can potentially show a text ad with up to 3 headlines and 2 descriptions, which means you're taking up more real estate at the search results page. Responsive search ads are generated by machine learning, mixing and matching headlines and descriptions that clients provide to create the best ad for any given query. So here we have an example of a responsive search ad. So we're popping kind of like the different ingredients that we want, both from a headline point of view and a description point of view. It's similar to how your smart display campaigns might work with responsive ads, where it's going to be mixing and matching the different variations of your headline with different variations of the description. So how does it work and what's required from you guys? So first and foremost, we just need to be providing the text assets. So this is anywhere between a minimum of 3, but up to 15 headlines, and a minimum of 2 descriptions, but up to 4, and then 1 final URL. So from there, Google's machine learning combines these assets into the best ad copy for any given query and optimizes for the performance that will lead to giving us the best chance to win that auction. It also allows you to create more ads per ad group easily and at scale, because we know that ad creation, whilst it's important, can be a quite time-consuming task. So responsive search ads, similar to smart display campaigns, you can monitor the performance of these particular assets and the ingredients that you've put in, and then allow you to introduce 1 or 2 new assets for your weaker performing ones. And so then we're constantly optimizing for the best performing message. So who can use it? Currently, the languages available is English, Spanish, French, and German. But the It is looking to expand to Japanese, Portuguese, Dutch, Italian, Russian, and Swedish later this month. So in terms of verticals, currently it's available for all verticals. However, there is a caveat in terms of those within the pharma, finance, and adult and other content-sensitive verticals can participate, but they will be going through a content review process and may not be eligible to serve. So moving along into implementation. So 3 easy steps to get up and running with responsive search ads. First and foremost, please feel free to share the accounts that you would like responsive search ads to be using with your Google Account Manager, so then they can get the whitelisting process underway. Once that's sorted, then you'll be able to start seeing those the option for responsive search ads appearing within your accounts by the plus new ad feature. And in terms of the ones that you should be selecting, we would be recommending campaigns with a good amount of traffic, and then preferably those campaigns with non-branded ad groups. So secondly, once you've determined what campaigns and ad groups you would like, we're just providing the text assets, and then if required, pinning those if you need them in a particular position, or if you need them to be, you need to be stating a certain message at all times. And then finally, you can then able to monitor the performance of these assets and then swap in and out your lowest performing assets for new variations to be included. So here we have an example of how it's appearing within your account, where to kick things off, asking for particular headlines, descriptions, one final URL. So the minimum that we need to get things up and running is 3 headlines and the minimum of 2 descriptions. Now you'll also notice that these headlines and descriptions have larger character limits than the previously expanded text ads. So once we've popped in the minimum of those 3 headlines and minimum of 2 descriptions, Google's machine learning will mix and match these messages. So ensure that your assets make sense individually and in combination. We're going to cover off a few good and bad examples later on. So because it is quite important to not be trying to repeating kind of redundant statements. Otherwise, then it limits the number of combinations that we can potentially serve. So here we have an example of a hotel brand in terms of just what it would be looking like in your account. So they've used 5 different headlines there, and then we can see the image on the right of the different variations of those headlines. So another visual example, same thing again, but within Google Ads Editor. We'll be going through in terms of kind of like the implementation process for this. But it's just all the different, we can be seeing that it's like all the different headlines and then how it will be uploaded. And we also have the potential to be doing it via bulk sheets as well. And please feel free to get in contact with your Google Account Manager if you need a sample bulk sheet. So now when it comes to the notion of pinning to control headlines. So we want to be where individual headlines and descriptions appear in your ads by pinning them to specific positions. So this might be pinning, as the example here on the screen with headline 1 in the description, is that we want to be pinning that in the first position. So pinning one headline or a description causes it to only show in that specific spot, preventing other headlines or descriptions from showing in its place. So since pinning reduces the overall number of the headlines or descriptions that can be matched to a potential customer search, pinning is not recommended for most advertisers. However, if you need to, so an example, one of my clients working in the finance industry is very careful about what they can and can't say in their ads. So they need to be very restrictive on that, and that's where pinning is a good fit. We would recommend to try pinning 2 or 3 headlines or descriptions to each position so that any of them can show in that particular position. So there's almost couple players that you can pull off your bench to play that particular position. This gives you more flexibility to find out which headlines and descriptions perform better. Finally, headlines or descriptions pinned to position 1 and position 2 will always show in those spots. However, content pinned to headline position 3 and description position 2 are not guaranteed to show in every ad. If you have content that must show in every ad, we would recommend pinning it to headline position 1 or description position 1. So if we pin your headlines to certain positions, you'll have fewer ads and they might not reach as many potential customers. So the more pinning and the more restrictive that we're becoming does kind of combat the purpose and the benefits of responsive search ads, of trying to mix and match as many potential variations to win you that auction. And here's just a visual example of what it would look like in your account on where we'd want to be pinning. So you're selecting the headline and the description down what appears kind of like down the right-hand margin there. So moving along to best practices. So first and foremost, we want to be right when it comes to writing your ads. First things first, write 3 headlines and 2 descriptions as you would want them to appear within a full text ad on the search results page. Now, secondly, add 3 headlines and 1 description that are distinct from the first step, but still relevant for the advertised product or service. Finally, you can add in a few variations of headlines and descriptions from step 1 and 2 until you reach the maximum number of assets. So for each responsive search ad, provide at least 5 headlines that are distinct from each other and do not use the same or similar phrases. Providing overly redundant assets will restrict our ability to generate ads. Add 1 responsive search ad per ad group to start things off. There is a limit to 3 responsive search ads per ad group as well. So don't feel that these are going to completely replace all of your existing hard performing ads. It's more just as a introduction into the roster. So ensure all ad groups have at least 1 expanded text ads and active keywords. And we would recommend testing in your high traffic campaigns for high traffic non-branded campaigns. So then we're getting a high enough volume for the responsive search ads to compete within. So we'll be going through a few do's and don'ts. So firstly, try to phrase an idea in different ways. The system will avoid showing redundant text side by side. Try to provide 2 or 3 headlines related to the keywords. For example, if you can use synonyms of the keywords or different orders of the phrases with the keywords present in that particular ad group. Try to add headlines with different meaning. For example, call us now, contact us now, and visit our store are all call to actions. So we would recommend adding more assets with different meaning, like potentially the name of your service or your company, or particular promotions that you might have on offer. So the one thing that we would, and a common kind of misstep with responsive search ads is we would try not to maximize the character counts in the headlines. So we would be recommending that you're testing both shorter and longer versions of these headlines, because Google's machine learning will assemble the ads in the optimal performance to give you the best chance of winning that auction. Whereas if we're trying to max out every character description in each headline, then it will limit the number of headlines that we could potentially be serving. So moving on to the more frequently asked questions. So what is the difference between a responsive search ad and a dynamic search ad? So dynamic search ads use the information available in your website URL, on your website specified keywords, category targeting, or page feeds to generate the ad copy, whereas responsive search ads use a combination of headlines and description that you have generated. Can I use both responsive search ads and ad suggestions? Yes. Responsive ads and ad suggestions are complementary. Responsive search ads are semi-automated, which gives you control over the ad copy messaging while utilizing the power of machine learning to create the best configuration for each query and user. Ad suggestion is more favored towards those long tail ad groups where Google identifies additional areas for opportunity that we might have a blind eye to. So does smart bidding work with responsive search ads? Yes, smart bidding works with all types of creatives. They improve the performance by setting the right bid for the auction, especially when paired with optimized ad rotation. Can responsive search ads show without extensions? Yes. Extensions such as site links will continue to serve with responsive search ads. Callouts and structured snippets will not co-trigger with a second description line. As always, our system will select extensions to maximize the performance of the text ad and serving the most relevant information that you're providing to the customer. So in terms of how we go about reporting on these, you can find these within the ads tab within your account. Now, if you were monitoring the performance, if you wanted to be monitoring the performance, you would be seeing the particular ads in the particular ad groups, and then underneath there is a little blue hyperlink that is saying view asset details. Now this will then take you into a section where you can see the performance of all the different assets that you have, rated from the best performing to the weakest. And then the second half of the asset details is showing you the most commonly used combinations. So this could be your strongest performing combinations is headline 1, headline 5, and description section 2. So in terms of how we can kind of be optimizing this, you would be looking through your asset report, what are my weakest performing assets, and then subbing those out, and then taking inspiration from what are your strongest performing assets, and then leveraging off those. So we've got a couple good and bad examples of responsive search ads. So I've mentioned a couple times of where we want to be avoiding maybe kind of redundant headlines. So we can see here in a good example, this is looking for a online shoe store. So all of the headlines that they have here are it's very diverse, and they could all be working in various combinations of each other. There's not too much repetition as we can see. So it's kind of giving us the broadest chance of Google mix and matching what is the strongest query, what is the strongest message to serve for that customer query. So probably more importantly is an example of the poor responsive search ads. So here we see very small number of assets put in. They've only had 4 headlines and 2 descriptions, so pretty much only just doing a tiny bit more than the bare minimum. And then you've got, looking through the headlines, where really all the headlines are pretty similar. They're all like fashionable women's shoes, trend-setting women's shoes. Not too much difference there, whereas in the previous slides, it was more of all of the diverse range and benefits of this store that the store offers. So that would be, the biggest recommendation there. So increasing the depth and variety of our headlines and descriptions, and making sure that we're not just kind of regurgitating similar phrases again and again and again, because what you'll see in the asset report when you're viewing those ads is that we'll have just overloaded on a few assets and you haven't really enjoyed the benefit of responsive search ads. So moving on to the Q&A section. Oh, don't jump the gun there. Whilst we're waiting for any kind of like responses to come through, just wanted to remind you guys that we're really keen to hear your feedback, and you can access the link in the description section of the video. And so any thoughts, any improvements, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So we're just moving to the questions here. Sorry, I'm just going to, there we go. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so a few questions. So we have a question, is pinning available in all accounts? Yes. So you can pin any of the headlines and descriptions. It's not restrictive. It's more in terms of, we would only be suggesting pinning if it's absolutely necessary, because it does limit the number of potential combinations that we could be serving. But yes, available within all accounts. So a question from Michael, in terms of the asset reporting, yes, it's only kind of done by impressions currently, but it would still be giving us kind of like the best indication on if this particular variation of headlines and descriptions is gathering the most volume, and then comparing that against your click-through rate and the performance of that ad. That's giving us a pretty strong indication that these type of messaging and this combination is what's really hitting home with your customers. Okay, so in terms of, I've got a question in terms of, I don't have responsive search ads within my account, how can I enable them? I would be reaching out to your Google account manager for them to whitelist them. That would be the most, in terms of the fastest way in terms of resolving it. Another question we have, does changing the headlines and description in the ads will result in creating new ad copy and the old data being vanished? Very good point. So it's you won't be losing the previous performance. It's the same as a smart display campaign with the responsive ads, where it's subbing out your weaker performing assets, doesn't lose all that history to date. It will then be just you'll be gaining insights in how once the introduction of new assets have been brought in, it will determine a new pecking order of weakest performing to strongest performing. But that's just within assets. The ad itself, in terms of looking at the click-through rate, average position, conversion rate, like you would viewing a normal ad, will still remain the same. Question from Raymond, will you suggest using a responsive search ad if the click amount is around 100 per month? It's more, obviously we would ideally want as many, we would want responsive search ads in those kind of like higher volume ad groups and campaigns, purely so then it's capturing, it's got a large audience to capture. Depending on kind of like how it's fitting within, if it wouldn't be the end of the world if you were to put it in a campaign that's only getting 100 clicks a month, but it would probably be more in terms of a bit of expectation setting where it wouldn't be as, there wouldn't be as potentially as a high as uplift as it could be in one of your more higher volume ad groups. So in terms of I've just had a question from Peter. Can responsive search ads be used in all countries? Bearing in mind the language beta. Let me just check on a second screen. I believe we kind of covered them off, but I don't know off the top of my head. I can't, let me just bear with me 1 second. I just got to find that. Okay. So in all countries. Good question, Peter. I would be, if it's, I would say it would be there are more countries being rolled out later this month. So it would be more in terms of, if you're unsure, if it's not appearing within your account, the first step I would be taking would be reaching out to your Google account manager to have the accounts whitelisted. Secondly, just to repeat the languages that it is currently available in is English, Spanish, French, and German. And later this month, they will be rolled out to Japanese, Portuguese, Dutch, Italian, Russian, and Swedish. So hopefully that covers it off. So I had a question saying, why would we suggest responsive search ads for non-branded ad groups as opposed to branded? Purely that there's going to be a high volume of queries in the more generic focused, which means that there's a higher chance of the responsive search ads to be able to compete and capture the customer queries. Whereas for a particular, by all means, you could try within a branded campaign, but it's that cost reward of like the expected uplift that we would be getting. We're going to get greater bang for our buck in the generic category where customer queries are going to be more broad, and a responsive search ad allows you to cater to those different messages. Just going through. So I've covered off that. So a question from Michael, is there anything else to understand ad performance of specific titles and headlines? That would just be, again, within the asset report of kind of your best performing ones. That would be the strongest indicator. And then same again on what type of, judging it like you would any of your ads within your ad, within an ad group, on the performance of how many impressions am I capturing, what is my click-through rate like, my average CPC, and whether or not, and really kind of like, is it driving, what is my conversion rate with these ads? So Christina, Christina had a similar question. I'd love to see ad variation reporting based on clicks and click-through rate rather than impressions. As far as I know, can't confirm or deny, but in terms of kind of, because it is still within its beta phase, so any of this type of feedback's really valuable. So, and it's the type of stuff that the product guys really enjoy. So I'd imagine that with a groundswell of more of that type of feedback from other customers like yourself, that it would definitely be considered going forward. Just checking to see if there's any other questions. Perfect. So I think that's about it. I think we've covered off. If there's no other, oh, sorry, another one final question. The descriptions of ads can be inserted in the keyword. So I don't believe that it is using dynamic keyword insertion. So it's not present currently. So it would just be more probably trying to build out those, making as many use of the different assets that you could utilize. So as many of the, I think it's the 15 headlines, and then as many descriptions as it will allow. So I don't think have we got any more. Okay, sorry, I've got to scroll down. There's a couple more questions. So a question saying, you say that the responsive search ads, the title may be of 90 characters in length. Is the manual ads title length going to change simultaneously? No, so this is just purely just for the responsive search ads that the additional character limit is allowed for. Second one, from Sharon, if you edit one element of the ad, will the entire ad go through the approval process again? No, so it will still be up and running. It will just, the new assets will be introduced, and then they will go through. It will probably say in the asset details report, it might say something like that they're still, that the new assets are learning and then up and running, but you're not going to, putting in new assets doesn't stop the activity of all the other ones, so it will just keep working. So you're not going offline. Question from Michael: if I pin a headline to position 1, would this headline always appear in every will always appear in every ad combination? Yeah. Yes. Long story short. Oh, I've just noticed my microphone's fallen off. I'm really hoping. Sorry, I've just noticed that's fallen off. If that's been an issue. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much, guys. I've just noticed that my microphone's fallen off, so I appreciate your patience with that one, and hopefully it wasn't too crackly. Again, thanks for your time today, and really appreciate any feedback that you may have. So please click in it can be found in the description section and near the end of the chat function, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So thanks for tuning in today.